Hi, Matt. I'm
Hello,
really
hello.
grateful, really grateful that you are here today. I thought it also might be helpful to hear from you just a quick introduction to who you are and just how who you are pertains to this question and response podcast that we're doing today.
Well, I think most importantly for our conversation, I'm a father,
Mm,
and a father of two children with disability, one who passed away, one who lives with profound autism under our roof, named Lena. So when I talk about Lena, that's her. She's 18. I get to work with an organization called 99 Balloons. Love it. And have gotten to study a little bit on this topic of disability and the church and so on and so forth. So those are the highlights.
You've done a little more than a little bit of study, but I also appreciate the fact that you lead with being a dad, because that is actually what got you here with me, is the
Mm,
fact that we are both parents of children with disabilities. And this is a podcast intended particularly for parents of children with disabilities. And,
love it.
throughout the season, we're talking to therapists and we're talking to advocates and experts and other parents. And we're talking about kind of particular topics, starting with delight instead of deficit, connecting to community, taking the next step towards a good future for our families. But today I wanted to pause from those types of interviews and really give a chance for the two of us to answer some listener questions that have come in response to some of those conversations. And what we did when we got these questions, some by email, others audio, was to try to look for themes and put them together in a way where we could address, even though we're addressing someone's particular question, having that question be somewhat representative of what other people, have said is on their mind. And to start, exhaustion was actually a theme that came up, and perhaps one that you and I can relate to. People talked about the exhaustion of advocacy, the exhaustion of building community, the exhaustion of like actually just being really, really tired. So I wanted to start with a question of, how do parents of kids with disabilities take care of ourselves? And what helps us avoid burnout and actually thrive as humans, as parents, as our own people? Any thoughts on that?
Well, let me set myself up this way, which doesn't answer the question, but I promise I will get there. I'm approaching. Is there any more intimidating thing than taking the families? And I know a lot of beautiful, wonderful families, and taking their questions and acting like I have the answers. That is very intimidating. So I'm not coming into this like an expert. I'm coming into this like, I think you'll agree with this approach,
Yes.
Rick Steves approach, right? Like, I can't be an
Okay.
expert on everywhere I've been necessarily, but I can tell you about a restaurant we went to. I had a really good meal and I enjoyed it. So
Yep.
I can tell you what I lived. It will. This is Rick Steves is the best interpretation I can do. But on exhaustion, um, it's a real thing. It turns out I'm 48, and the energy level is, I think, not going up and to the right.
Yeah.
So, you know, I like the way that you phrased it. It's so many fronts. You are moving as a parent in this space on so many fronts simultaneously.
Hmm.
It is whack-a-mole, might be a way to put it. You are
Yep.
never feeling ahead is probably something to get comfortable with. With that said, I think that the thing that I thought about is something that we decided. We have two other teenagers now, so we now have three teenagers, but we did this a long time ago. And the way we thought about our family was like a dice.
Hmm.
Plural would be die, but dice, a dice. And on that dice, like when you roll a dice,
Hmm.
somebody is forward facing, like
Hmm.
their numbers up, right? And so I think our commitment or our way about thinking about our family is that everybody gets a turn
Hmm.
for it to land on their number. And we have to have a lot of intentionality in our family, because the default way that the die starts out at the day and ends at the day
Yeah.
is that the person with the most need in our family, we're all on in the boat, we're all geared towards them. We just
Yeah.
That's, nobody woke up and decided it. it it is, nobody's sad or mad about it, really. Some days they might be, but most days that's just the way it is. And so we really focused on, how do we make sure that our other children's number comes up. and
Mm-hmm.
we're intentionally focused on them, maybe for 24 hours. It may be taking them to dinner, taking them to breakfast. It may not be much, but if we weren't intentional, that it would have never happened. And the level of intentionality to focus on the different members of your family. And with that said, like, it is, my wife is Jenny. It is Jenny's turn. That means, kids, I'm going to need your help. You're going to help me.
Mm-hmm.
That means Lena's not going to be as happy. Her day's not going to go as smoothly and as
Mm-hmm.
perfect. And that's okay, because it's Jenny's number that's up. And so I think that's probably just a very 10,000 foot, not super helpful, maybe, but it is a philosophy that I think in the long run makes you less bitter.
Yeah.
It allows you and it allows you to have a strategy whereby other people become the focus and attention point, not just on their birthday. you know
Right. Well, no, I love that. I find that very helpful myself, and I think just to add on to what you've said, there is, I think, can be a lot of guilt in our parenting when we are not fully meeting what the perceived needs of the children, especially, but any other member of our family, and yet recognizing that our needs as parents are actually a part of the family's needs, and our various children's needs are all a part of that, and not seeing it as this kind of zero sum game where everyone is supposed to have a full cup at all times, but actually that we, all part of being human is actually experiencing the disappointment of not having our needs fully met at all moments. And I think for me, that's looked a little bit like, okay, if I can't have like an hour of contemplation in the morning with my peaceful, solitude, maybe 3 minutes will actually still be a reset. Just trying to kind of um, figure out if I can't have a date night once a week with my husband at the same time, what would it look like for us to be intentionally connecting in within the limitations of our family so that we can continue to, lead well here together. And so I think that's actually part of what this podcast is meant to be, really empowering parents to do, is to think in like both meaningful and manageable ways about what would actually work for your family, and who are some people who might help to answer those questions in terms of your personal circumstances. You've got a crying baby in the middle of the night. It's a different circumstance than, I've got a 19-year-old who is pretty self-sufficient in a lot of ways right now. That's very different in terms of meeting those needs. So anyway, I appreciate the dice. I will come back to that myself. I'm going to move on to a question from Dan. He will explain who he is in just a minute because he's going to ask his question for us.
Hello, my name is Dan, and I'm from Massachusetts. I work at a wonderful small organization that supports people with disabilities of all ages. When my own child was born with cancer and then had serious mental health issues, one of the biggest questions I struggled with was, is it okay to feel grief for my own expectations for what I thought my child and my life would be? I know many parents that I work with have felt the same way. Thanks for all you are doing for our community.
Well, this is a big one. And
Yeah.
was it Dan? I want to
Dan.
get the name right.
Yeah.
Dan, what a great, honest, beautiful question. So first and foremost, I think we got to be willing to be honest. And I love honesty. Sometimes it's raw, sometimes it's gritty. But I see this through 99 Balloons. We get to work with a lot of families. And I see this. I see people at all different stages of answering this question all the time. And some are struggling with it. Some are not struggling with it, but should be. And I'll just, there's this tension in our families where they love the child that they have. And many of our families, they wouldn't change things that you from the outside might think they would change. And they've arrived at that point, and yet they have a grief. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's that tension, and they feel a lot of guilt, as you alluded to earlier. They feel a lot of guilt for that tension because they do love their child. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the honesty in this equation is to understand what grief is. and just level set on what grief is. And for Jenny and I, grief is any time that life, the realities of life, that there's a gap between the realities of life and what you expected.
Mm-hmm.
That can be very small things. That can be huge life-changing things. Divorce is something to grieve. This isn't, people don't get married to get divorced. It's a gap between what they thought. There's all kinds of sizes, and you can't measure these things, but your dog dies, well, I thought my dog was going to be, I love my dog. For some people that's enormous. For some people, they move fast. You can't measure these things, but grief is when there is a gap between reality. So I certainly think, and my experience has been, I certainly think we do grieve as parents. First and foremost, yes. The answer is yes. And the hope on the other side of that is not just grief for grief's sake, but in interacting with so many families, I get a beautiful picture that the families that I admire the most and want to be the most like, they have grief. They have come through grief. It was a part of the journey to accept and love the life that they now have. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't get to that without going through the grief process. That's what we want to do. What we want to do as parents is to arrive at that place, but not go through the grief. But I don't see that as an option. So yes, I believe that we as families, there is a time and there is a season for us to be honest and open that this is not what I expected. This is different than what I expected. And that is a portal for you to begin to love the actual life that you have. Now, you and I have talked about this before. I do not think that it's society's job or the church's job or the community around you's job to grieve your child, because I don't think they should have expectations of your child. Mm-hmm. You had expectations of your life and your child. And when somebody else meets your child from the community, I believe it's their role to celebrate your child just as they are in the beautiful person that they are. So that's different. There's a tension there as well, but that's kind of how I think about
all of that, including that addendum. And I really agree. I don't know how I could have come to a place of not just acceptance, but as you said, celebration of Penny without admitting the grief. And for me, it felt like the grief of her diagnosis exposed some things in me that I had to grieve about myself, which included, actually, I had to grieve my expectations, not because they weren't fulfilled, but because I had some expectations that I was like, oh, shoot. I expected my life to go a certain way that that really cut a whole swath of people out of my life. And now I want to welcome them, but I still have to grieve them. But then there was also some grief that gets rolled in, just that has to do with some of the potential pain and suffering that Penny was going to face. And I think there was a real love that was really a part of that. And I've, again, become much more trusting of our community and of the ways in which her life is unfolding. And so I don't experience that same grief now, but even distinguishing between different types of grief and again, allowing ourselves to go through that without guilt, and trusting that, like being honest and expressing our need really does lead us into that place of greater, not just acceptance, but celebration of what we've been given and who we've been given.
Yeah, I think having lost a child and having adopted a child with disability, it gives me a weird, but there are griefs that you never get over.
Right.
And there are griefs that are leading you to a different place, and you will not always be there.
Yeah.
And you have to you have to distinguish between those. There's some things that you may never get through, quote unquote.
Yeah.
It may be you carry it with you and you build a life around it. So I'm always very quick to never tie a bow on it all, and you're going to get through it and it's all going to be great. I don't believe that, and I don't think that's the way that life unfolds. So I do want to be careful with that.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, here's another question from Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I live in Connecticut with my husband and 2 children, the eldest of whom is 12 years old and lives with a rare disease called Wiedemann-Steiner syndrome. My question, Amy Julia, is where are the spaces that my family should make a concerted effort for my daughter to show up now so she develops lifelong friendships and community relationships that will follow her into adulthood?
Well, I think to love that question, Sarah. To back away from that question, I think there's a philosophical great um, nugget in that question, which is uh, we often parents are some of the slowest to believe and accept and really grab hold of this idea that our kids are a gift to the community around them. And to me, that question had that embedded in it, like you're believing that. And we I if you believe that and that is your guiding light, to me that changes the way you think about your child's future, their involvement in their church, their involvement in their community. So, I don't have the, design your community this way and this is the best way to do it. I've seen it done so many different ways. We get to work in churches in rural areas and small towns, ginormous those places look very different. The communities in those spaces,
Yeah.
the lives of people with disability, they look very different. I think for me, if I were to back up so Lena is now 18. We work with children through 99 Balloons and we work with adults. If I were to be thinking about what I would tell myself when Lena was 5, um, I just I don't know. I think it's that guiding light of, if you believe your child is a gift, and I think we had some questions on, should the community that I'm in have people with disability in it?
Yeah.
So I don't think that that's mandatory,
Mm-hmm.
because I see disability as a part of the human experience. So if your community is working for you, I think you should be. I think our friends with disabilities should be embedded into their community, and
Mm-hmm.
that requires advocacy, and it requires work, and it requires a lot of moxie as a family with a young child that may not quite fit into every little place that you go to. And if you can do that with love, all the better. And you need to do that with love, because you are cultivating the community for the future, right? Like I can resort to anger very easy. I'm really good at it. I know you're shocked. Right. Like I can be a lot, like, especially when it comes to my kid and you don't seem to like it. But like with teachers, with churches, to, to burn these bridges doesn't really serve anybody well
Mm-hmm.
in what you want for your kids. So I think just, I don't think you have to go design a whole new community. I think you have to be an advocate within the community that you naturally fit into. You might go find some additional relationships. I think that'd be really fun. I think you'd feel less isolated and less lonely. But I think you are finding a community of people that are willing to listen and that are willing to accept your child. And if you have that, I think you have something to work with. There'll be still a lot of education. There'll be a lot of pain points. There'll be a lot of tweaking and trying it. And let's do it again. That didn't work. Let's try it again. But to me, the heart of the community and the heart of the people you're working with guides whether that's going to work or not. So
Yeah, and I think I agree with everything you just said, and to take a little bit of a different tack, because we just recently moved. And so I'm reading in Sarah's question this, like, how can I be sure that these are going to be lifelong community and friendships? And in our case, it's like, oh, we just moved. So we're kind of starting over. Was it worth it to be, connecting to people in our old community? And I still think what actually was happening there, sure, first of all, there's some relationships that can travel with us, but others where we were learning how to be a part of a community and how to show up, how to trust a community. And we were also learning how a community could welcome us and look for that. And that was true whether it was like going to the bookstore, just like a very public and kind of who knows if you're going to see anyone type of space, or into a much more you really should be known by name if you're walking in again and again to a school or a church or some other like institutional place. But I do think that kind of act of showing up and of, and then I guess the inverse is true too, of like we create spaces in our own homes, at least potentially, that where we're welcoming other people in. And again, not apologizing for our family member with a disability, but saying, hey, guess who you get to be with? And really being intentional about that with all sorts of people, whether it's our peers as adults or our children's peers.
Yeah, that's good insight. I'm sure you learn a lot from moving to a whole new
Yeah.
community and doing it all over again.
Yeah, at a totally different stage. And there have been, challenges and gifts, I suppose, that comes with that.
Sure.
So I am gonna like skip ahead a little bit just in terms of time here and ask a question to finish what we're talking about that is really about we've talked a little bit about connecting to community. We've talked about the emotional exhaustion piece of things. I also want to talk about these questions that have come up about the idea of like taking the next step, the name of this podcast. And here's one that I think kind of summarizes what people were asking. There are so many therapies, appointments, and skills that my son needs. No matter what I choose to focus on, I always feel guilty about all the things I'm not doing. How do I let go of guilt as I take the next step forward?
Yeah, well, I don't know that I can help you let go of guilt, but I hope I hope I can. I mean, I oftentimes look at other families and I'm way better at giving other families the benefit of the doubt. My wife in
Yes.
particular is so loving and tender, compassionate, but then that, that doesn't always translate to when you look at yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jenny and I often have conversations about like, what would you tell another family that brought you that problem? Like, would
Mm-hmm.
you be that harsh with them? Would you feel like they were doing that poor of a job? No, like never. It's 100. We work with dozens of family. We're always like, oh my gosh, you're killing it. You're doing a great job. You don't have it all figured out. Welcome to the club, right? This is
Yeah.
the community that you're a part of. And yet on ourselves, we always feel that inadequacy, the guilt. So, I mean, I don't know how helpful it is other than to say like, I feel that too. And we experience that feeling as well. I think the guiding light for like how we make those decisions, because you can't do all of the therapies that are recommended. You can't physically do all the things that could really be beneficial and be helpful. And so I think just knowing your own child and prioritizing what it is they need to work on in what order, and thinking ahead, thinking of the community that they would. So for us, when we think of Lena, we want her to have relationships and we want her to be known. So our guiding light in making those decisions is, will this help her have a routine, which is she very much needs, have a
Mm-hmm.
daily routine whereby she's loved and known in community,
Yeah.
right? Like, could she be doing X? She could, but for us, that situates, and that's particular to Lena. That's because we know Lena, so that's going to change. But you know your person best,
Mm-hmm.
and so to prioritize, man, in this next season, this is what we're working on. We could be doing 100 other things. Maybe we'll do 5, and we're not gonna be able to do it all. But I mean, I do think the gift of people with disability is to let go of some of that optimization
Yes.
lifestyle Instagram feed that we all have, which is our friends with disability are constantly reminding us that we don't have to be the best versions of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that also has been a great gift to me.
Yeah, I've stopped talking about anyone in my family's potential and trying to kind of maximize it. I mean, because it's true
Yeah.
of not just Penny, but my typical kids as well, where I'm like, actually, I do want to pay attention to how you've been created, what the purpose is within your life. And I want to help you both to recognize limits and possibilities in who you are. So I do think some of this guilt aspect is like a mindset shift. But I
Yes.
also appreciate what you're saying as far as like self-compassion instead of just the compassion we would show to other families in the same place. And then the other thing I thought about was just did an interview with Jillian Benfield, and she was essentially talking about how no helps us with yes. And what I mean by that is she was just like, yeah, like I wanted to be the Uber mom who was doing all the things for my kids with disabilities and all the things on the PTO because that was important for advocacy and all the things to self-care. And she was like, I had to start saying no to some things in order to say yes to the most important things. So again, if you're in a position, as I sometimes find myself, where I realize like I really could slow down and I need to, and it is kind of pull back, be systematic almost about what are my priorities, but sometimes that's not the case. We're doing the very best we can, and we just need to be gentle with ourselves and trusting that like we're gonna if we are doing the best we can, loving our kids and being in community, it's gonna be okay.
I have this thing where, there's high functioning alcoholics, that
Mm,
concept. So
yes.
you look at them and they're killing it from the outside, but, behind closed doors, they're not doing so hot and
Yeah.
they're nursing dependency. Jenny and I often, I call us, the equivalent I think there's the equivalent of
Mm,
high functioning disability dad, high functioning disability mom, where
interesting.
we're trying to make our lives look like our
Look.
peers, and we're
Okay.
trying to win at work, win socially, make sure that we make the cupcakes for the other kids thing, and do 52,000 disability things that are on our schedule. And I just think the more you can accept that your life is not like your peers, and the more that you can minimize comparison to
Hmm.
other families, to whatever role it is that you're in, mom, dad, other families, if we can minimize comparison, if we can learn to say no, we can learn to accept that our lives have additional limits, and the way that we love the people in our family is by not looking like our peers, our schedules not looking like our peers, our decisions always not mirroring our peers because our lives
Hmm.
don't mirror our peers. There's just a real freedom in that. And, it's hard to maybe live that out, but it's kind of freeing also.
I appreciate that so much. I'm really glad that we landed on that place, and really grateful for just the various offerings you've had for us in this conversation. I hope that for our listeners, it is helpful to just be able to ask some questions and really kind of puzzle through this together and give each other. I think one of the things that comes within a disability community is the opportunity to give grace to one another and to ourselves, and to recognize that yeah, there's grief and there's also a tremendous amount of love and beauty and freedom that surrounds it. And I am grateful for the words you've brought today to help us explore all of that.
What an honor. Thank you for doing what you do and being who you are. How fun to walk through these questions.